Welcome back to Journey Map, the Craft&Crew podcast, where we dive deep into the leading minds behind the world's top creative agencies and industry experts. My name is Dave Hale, and today I'm joined by special guest Linda Tong, CEO of Webflow. In this episode, we talk about Linda's diverse background in mobile and product leadership roles, her passion for product marketing, and the importance of making bold decisions to drive innovation and growth. I hope you enjoy this conversation, and thank you for taking this journey with us today. Linda Tong, CEO of Webflow, welcome to Journey Map.
Thank you for having me, and it's good to see you.
It's great to see you again. We had the pleasure of meeting at the Webflow Partner Summit. Full disclosure, our agency Craft&Crew is a Webflow premium partner. So just for anyone claiming nepotism of the interview, that is exactly what's happening here. But Linda, wonderful to have met you a few weeks ago, and amazing to have you on today. We're super grateful to be able to capture your journey and tell your story.
Absolutely. I'm really honored to have been asked. So thank you for hosting me.
Oh, well, we can just keep going back and forth with that banter, or we can get into the crux of this. So, Linda, what I find so interesting about your career, well, there's many things I find interesting about your career. I'm going to highlight some of them today. But you are, and I mean this with as much respect and care as humanly possible. Like, you're in such a quintessential Silicon Valley tech executive, in that you went to Yale and you've been in product and you've worked for, your resume stops. It's all, oh, I've heard of that company. I've heard of that company. And then you can see the progression. You did this, and then VP, and then a GM, and a COO, president, COO, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going to touch on all elements of that journey. And there's lots that has been written about you throughout the course of your career. It was easy to research you for this episode. But what we want to know on Journey Map is to dive deeper and understand Linda at a more foundational level, and understand how some of your experiences and life story tie in to where you've gotten to now. So if you would humor me, I'd love to start with Linda at 8. Who, if you were to summarize, who is Linda at 8? Where are you living? What's going on in your world at that time?
Okay. So Linda at 8, I think I was in fourth grade. So I was living in Arlington Heights, a suburb of Chicago. And actually, it was at 8 that I remember our teachers were asking us, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what are your favorite hobbies, and what are your skills? And I remember we would draw on these booklets, sort of the responses to these sections. And what I wanted to be at 8, I remember very clearly, because my parents had sort of a very odd reaction to it when I brought it home. But there's a picture of myself in this navy blue jumpsuit, and on it said ExxonMobil. And I told my parents my dream job in life was to move to New Jersey and pump gas, because I just love the smell of gasoline. And New Jersey was one of those states I'd been to as a child where they do full service gas stations. And so people would come and pump their car, and it was such a wonderful experience, filling your gas.
So, I mean,
everything you said, right?
Now, I'm just trying to do the timeline here. So it would be a few years later, I think, that ExxonMobil would fall a little bit out of vogue. But, at that time, thank gosh you didn't get into that career path at that time. Things may have wound up a bit different. So what were your parents' reactions? What did they do when you were growing up, Linda?
Yeah, I mean, I had sort of, what you would consider a stereotypical Asian family. So you've got, a mix of tiger parents who want you to be wildly successful, but also as the second child, they really focus on my brother. So he got a lot of the heat. He got the tiger parents. And, I got the parents who were just please don't be bad. Please just do something with your life so you don't become a drain on our family. And so when I brought home this picture, they were both interesting that this is what you want to aspire to do. Your brother wants to go be a doctor and a computer engineer, and you want to be a gas station attendant. Interesting. But my dad, who was actually really unique for Asian parents and loved me more than anything, I was a total daddy's girl, He's like, look, honey, you can do whatever you want to do. Like, whatever you put your mind to, you can do it. Reach for the stars and like just be happy. And it was like amazing that he was so wildly supportive and he never told me to like kill any of my dreams. And he was like, look, if you live this all gas, go for it. Just do it, like do whatever makes you happy. And so that I think, you know, and they used to joke about it with their friends. They're like, our kid wants to go come gas in New Jersey. And I never really knew how ironic it was with them, but like it was awesome because they actually like genuinely supported me in whatever I wanted to do.
Well, I mean, maybe it wasn't New Jersey, but not too far away in terms of where you would go to school in New Haven, Connecticut, at Yale. So close to New Jersey geographically, I guess. Pumping gas slightly different. So you enter this Yale experience, like I said, painting the quintessential picture of the Silicon Valley Tech CEO for us, but you enter with for a bachelor's of economics. What was it about that program and that school that inspired you to go that path?
Yeah, there was, you know, it's actually interesting. Like so, you know, I was in Arlington Heights. My family actually moved to Chicago, or sorry, to North Carolina a couple of years later. And, you know, I went from dreaming about pumping gas to then sort of having very like wild dreams as I went through like middle school and high school. And I was constantly changing what I wanted to be. And at one point I wanted to study architecture. You know, I had a teacher in high school who was teaching us like European history. And I got really excited about the Czech Republic and the like architecture there. And I told my parents, I'm going to go be an architect and a photographer. And I'm going to move to the Czech Republic and take photos. And of course, they're like, sure, whatever. And as I was applying for college, you know, my parents had pushed me to like, you know, dream big, apply for the top schools, even if you don't know if you can get in, because you might, you know, you only get one shot at this. And I ended up getting into Yale, and they had this amazing architecture program. It was, you know, one of the best architecture programs in the nation. And I told them like, oh yeah, I want to do that, and like maybe I'll be meds, like I'll be pre med,
Just do
and
architecture with a bit of med on the
yeah,
side.
and I was like, why not?
Yeah.
So I went there with that intent. And as soon as I got there, I met like the architecture students, and I realized I was like, oh, this isn't just like a hobby where you get to draw. Like you actually be pretty serious. And I realized pretty quickly that that dream was just sort of a nice dream. But the minute you started to put pen to paper, I was like, this isn't me. And then the med school thing, I realized to do the labs, like, you know, to do the organic chemistry lab and things like that, you had to get an extra set of shots, like different vaccines. And I just hated needles. So I was like, well, I'm dropping that. So clearly good decision making. So I dropped out of that as well. And I ended up really enjoying a couple of like my intro classes in economics. And I was like, oh, I'll just become an econ major. So I sort of actually had like no real path. And I just stumbled into it as I found classes that I really enjoyed and professors that I really liked. And what was great about it is a lot of people don't talk about colleges as much, but Yale is a liberal arts education. And I didn't understand that. My brother went to an applied school. He went to Wisconsin, and you go in there with a major and you're going to like study things that give you very real applicable skills and capabilities when you go into the working world. Whereas with liberal arts educations, they really teach you how to learn, right? So you get this broad sort of variety of capabilities and skills because they're forcing you into all these different classes that don't necessarily equal a professional on the other side. And I just didn't really know what that meant. But like, I'm so grateful for it because I wasn't allowed to actually take a very, you know, a lot of people go to school and they study marketing or they study finance. You can't study that at Yale. You like the
Hmm.
closest thing to it was economics. And it forced me down a path where I was more of a generalist. And my number one skill set that I learned during that time was actually how to learn new things. And like that sort of opened up my mind to everything in the future.
Isn't it interesting though how these like butterfly effect moments can really change the course of our lives. Though for you, a fear of needles, therefore I can't possibly go into this path because I might have to get 2 or 3 needles.
Yeah.
Therefore, let's just shut down a dream because of that. But imagine had you not had that fear, where things could have gone and wound up today. It's just, I love thinking about that kind of stuff. I think about that stuff all the time. Even like, had I turned right instead of turned left, what would have happened? I can find myself getting lost in the like philosophical existentialism of how big all these decisions are. Um, so as you graduate, so you're kind of a Midwest turned East Coast person. You had a bit of a stint at Citigroup, but where I really want to start focusing is you're joining Google in a product marketing role in Mountain View. So what was the journey from home? And your parents were living in the East Coast as well at the time. So what was the journey from home? Kind of Linda goes west. How did that happen?
Yeah, it actually, again, like it's funny because a lot of these things, they can look really intentional, but I had done this internship at Citigroup in Hong Kong, and everybody who was my peer in like economics at Yale, they're all going to investment banking or consulting as their post collegiate, first job. And after testing that out, I was like, oh God, this is horrible. Like it was not for me. And I knew pretty quickly. And so as I was applying for jobs, they have these like career fairs and everything. I pretty much like walked to every booth. And if it was investment banking or consulting, I immediately walked away. And in the fall, Yale's career booth is predominantly investment banking and consulting. At least it was at that time. And there were only 3 companies that didn't fit that bill. It was Google, Microsoft, and Abercrombie and Fish. And so I ended up applying to all 3 and ultimately picked Google. But it was one of those things where nowadays people look at them like, oh, how'd you know you want to go to Google? And the real answer, just being really honest, is I just knew I didn't want to be in iBanking. And this was like the best thing that there was that wasn't iBanking. And I just got so lucky because, I'd always been, my family is relatively transient. So like beyond living in North Carolina and in Chicago, we also lived in like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and like, they'd moved a lot. And so I was never really afraid of leaving home, and like going west just always seemed really exciting and wonderful. And knowing that I could work on something completely new and different, it was such an easy move. My parents were really supportive. And I knew that if I could just go out there, the thing that sold me the most was back then, like the perks at Google were wild. Like you're getting free smoothies, free meals, free everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, this company's going to feed me. Like whatever they want me to do, I'll do it. And so, yeah, I had no idea what it was going to turn into. I really didn't have a ton of intent. But I went there because it just seemed like a really wonderful place. It looked like, it was a bunch of really cool products, and like tech just seemed really exciting at the time. And it wasn't iBanking.
It was definitely not iBanking, but some of the products you would touch, and what I'm interested in, because a bit of a thread of your career is around owning the product.
Yeah.
So as a first job to enter into product marketing, like you said, you had a liberal arts education, you learned how to learn, but you had no tangible skills in marketing, let alone product marketing. And yet somehow you find yourself developing the marketing plans for Chrome's browser launch, and working on launching Android OS, and collaborating on the product launches for OS updates and things like this. So, how did you find yourself in these positions? I mean, yes, you have this great education, but how did you find yourself in these positions so early on in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I have to be real. Like a lot of it was luck. It was, I joined Google, and they actually placed me on what was considered the client team at the time. So the client team was any sort of client software that you could download from Google at the time. And so that was, if people even remember it back then, but there was Google Toolbar, which was like a toolbar add-on for different browsers, right? Like Firefox or Safari. There was Google Desktop, which was this downloadable client that could search your desktop. Google Talk, which, was their chat agent. And Google Pack was just all these things combined. And they're working on this secret project, Google Chrome, which was going to be the browser. And so I got really lucky and I got placed on that team. And what was really fun was this was the first time that we were going to launch something, one in like 52 languages, but two across three OSs. So, Windows, Mac, and Linux. And then on top of that, it was one of the few launches that actually like hadn't really been leaked. Like most of Google's launches have been leaked, like well ahead of the time. But it was such an exciting moment, and I happened to get placed there, and an opportunity to really show up and do a great job. And I had a great team that I got to work with, and I fell in love with the product because what we were building was truly revolutionary. Like if you think about how browsers have evolved since then, the speed, the lightweightness of it, the fact that even the search bar, like the search bar used to be just like a URL bar. I mean, you had to type in a URL. Now you can search in it. It's like very multifunctional. Like Chrome really leveled up, what a browser could do. And, it's had sort of like a massive life since then. But in doing that, one, I brought like my skill set, which is I could learn anything. So regardless of my role, I really want to understand the product that we're building and how to tell a story, explain to people, why this is great. The other thing that I realized in the job was most people didn't know what a browser was. We ran a user research study, and as we were talking to folks, we're trying to figure out the name and like what features we should be highlighting to really promote the Google browser at that time. And I would ask people, "Oh, what browser do you use?" And they'd be like, "Oh, I use Google." And I was like, there is no Google browser. And like really what they meant was search. They all knew that they would click a button and Google search would show up. And
Or it's
so
whatever set is your homepage is what you
exactly.
think the internet is. Yeah.
The funniest answer was I used to ask people, because I'd be like, oh, like tell me about opening your browser. And they'd be like, oh, I click on that blue E and then like Google shows up. It's the Google browser. And I was like, huh. And I was like, how do you think you spell internet? Right? Because the E was for Explorer, and multiple people spelled internet with an E. They like ENT because they legitimately did not know they were using Internet Explorer. They actually thought their browser was Google. So a big part of my work was one, learning about product marketing, but two, learning about customers and like really meeting them where they are. So we had to teach people what was a browser because most of them just didn't know what that was. I teach some people how to spell internet. But then from there, I had explained to them why selecting a browser was important and, had an amazing job. And like little did I know that was product marketing, is figuring out what product you had, what value was solving, and for whom. And loved the job. And I loved working on it because it was such a great product. And after doing a really great job of that, I sort of got, I was in this rotational program at Google. So you had to move jobs after like your first year. And so for my first year, because I'd done well and I'd gotten like really high ratings, I was talking with my boss's boss, and she was like, well, what do you want to do next? What do you want as your next rotation? And I essentially got my first pick which was moving to Android because I had like a deep passion for the mobile space. And so that's where luck turned into opportunity of just like, hey, if you have this opportunity, you do a great job at visibility, you can start to grind your career. And that's probably the first time that I would say I really drove intent and I knew what I wanted and I started to go after it because I knew where my skills were and where my passion was.
Well, and from that opportunity, I mean, you turned it into something pretty exceptional. When you left Google, you go over to Tapjoy, eventually becoming VP of Product Management and Chief Product Officer there as well for a few years. Now, Tapjoy is a mobile advertising and monetization platform, so that makes perfect sense, kind of going from the Android experience over to there. Now, albeit, I'm guessing you're a fairly young age now in these pretty senior, pretty significant roles, even if Tapjoy was kind of a startup or a scale-up at the time. But, because we only have so much time in this interview, what I really wanted to highlight, was this through line of product focus. But I think that the jump where you would eventually wind up is truly confusing and probably wonderful. And so I just have to go there first. 2015, you join the NFL, you get drafted. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah. Receiver, right?
And as VP Product and Innovation, working for the NFL out of LA. So is this like an Indeed posting you saw, or like, were you walking down the street and someone handed a flyer? How did you hear about this job, and why did you say to yourself, like, I have been working in mobile now for the better part of a decade in senior product leadership positions. I definitely should head over to football.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually perfect. It was, at this time, from basically 2007 to 2015, I'd more or less established myself as a mobile expert. That was like my domain, from Android to Tapestry, where I worked on mobile, to my next startup, Nextbit, where I was again building a phone and working on an Android like ecosystem. Uh, Many people had known about me as like this product person in mobile who really understood everything from the hardware through the OS and firmware all the way up to the app layer. And I'd actually just started doing some like thought leadership on like what are great apps and how should people think about mobile as like the future. Um, and I actually wasn't looking for a job. I wasn't like actively like seeking for anything, but I had this cold call from like a headhunter, and she had said, "Hey, like I'm working for a client. I won't say who, but they're looking for someone who, really understands mobile, and even sort of like uh, other device endpoints that connect to TV." And she was like, they're moving into a digital space from historically what was like broadcast and web. And they really need someone who understands where users are engaging in the future and can bring that expertise and build this next generation of products for them. I'm like, oh, that sounds totally up my alley. I was like, I'm not sure if I'm looking to move or do anything differently, but I'm like kind of a mobile person. And she's like, well, you'd work on mobile, but the other thing I've noticed about you, and she was like, is I looked at your Twitter and I was like, okay. And at the time I was, for what it's worth, I've deleted everything from back then. But at the time, I have like my own personal passion, which is like sports betting and sports in general. And, any given point, you can probably find a couple of tweets now. But like back then, I was constantly tweeting about, college basketball or the NFL, which are like my two passion plays. And it's just nonstop. It's like whether it's complaining about bad calls or really great passes or just highlighting what's going on. But like, I just love sports and I love football. And she's like, I've just noticed this on your Twitter. Like, are you actually a fan of the NFL? Are you a big football person? I was like, oh, I love it. Like Sunday, Monday, Thursday, that's my life. And she's like, okay, and I'll tell you, the client is the league. And they're looking for someone who really, like a Silicon Valley type, who really gets mobile and digital. But they've actually struggled because there aren't as many people who have a background and have and are also deeply passionate about football. So I fit this really unique persona, and I ended up going down there, meeting with the team. They'd also, funny enough, I was most excited because they showed me my interview slate, and one of the gentlemen on my interview slate was a person named Tom Brady, and I was like, oh my god, I have to go. Lo and behold, there's actually a separate Tom Brady who is
Different Tom
not.
Brady who works in the NFL.
Yeah,
I'm sure he doesn't have any stories about people being very excited to meet with him. And
oh yeah, of course not. But like it was definitely a highlight. But yeah, I got really excited about just talking to the league about how they could think about the next generation of fans, and I ended up going down there and talking to them, and I was the perfect fit at what they were looking for, and it was just a match made in heaven, and it was such a wonderful experience getting to work on everything digital for the NFL.
So I can understand, after a few years, why you may move on, and App Dynamics being your next stop in the CV. But I'm going to make a bit of a reach here, and please, all Webflow people and board know this is a safe interview, and I have only good intentions with what I'm about to say. But Linda, I also at one point in my career had what I would consider to be my like dream job, where like passion meets income, let's say. And but when it was time for me to move on from there, it was actually to start our business. But I still look back on that job, and I'll still say like that's the high that I'm chasing still to this day. Like I want to find projects within our business, and entrepreneurship is fun and exhilarating and so on and so forth. But I can openly and honestly say that like what I'm doing does not have exactly like for you. For me, it was kind of live events production and management. And the example is a friend of mine took his daughter to see Cirque du Soleil on the weekend, and I'm asking about how was the line queuing, and these kind of nerdy things like that. That's what I would have been tweeting about in 2012. So you left the NFL. Are you finding that it was time to move on? It was the right time to go, or do you still have these moments now in your uh, when I say short lived, only because you only became CEO at Webflow a few months ago, but now in that role at Webflow, do you find yourself kind of waking up in the morning and saying, how can I connect that passion, or how can I have a bigger high than maybe you got in that role at the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, so much in there. So leaving the NFL was really tough. I remember when I went in and I resigned, I actually started crying, and like my boss at the time was like, "Wait, why are you resigning? Like, you seem so upset." A big part of it was, the job with the NFL was in Los Angeles, which who doesn't love Los Angeles? But my husband, is from the Bay Area and really wanted to come back, and there's just a lot of opportunities back here, and so we made a personal decision to move to the Bay. And so there wasn't an opportunity to be remote there. And so it was a pretty easy decision for that alone. I think pair with it, the other thing that I don't always talk about because it's a little bit degenerate, but I'm a big sports bettor. And when I was just at the league, they hadn't started to even engage with, I would say, like sports betting companies. So it was a fireable offense to even be photographed in front of a sports book or to be caught gambling, because there's a lot of risk that you might actually, have insider knowledge or influence. And so it was always good to keep like a really clean line between the two. So there's also the benefit of being able to kind of get back to my degenerate self. Um, and so, yeah, it was a really tough decision to leave. I still love it. I mean, but what's great is actually, as a fan, like I'm going to be a fan for life. I'm so like, I love my experience there, but I get to enjoy football on Sunday, Mondays, and Thursdays. And more importantly, where before I was there and I was like praying, like, please don't have a blackout or please don't make any mistakes. Or, I was really stressed every time a game was on TV. Now I get to sit back as a fan and just love it, which has been really awesome. But the thing that I took away from it, and actually the thing that I found at Webflow that has like really energized me, is when I was at the league, everything I built, I talked about it in terms of why did it provide value for our fans? And I think this like actually speaks to just the core of who I am as a product person. I believe to be a great product person, you have to love the product. And I'm a selfish product person. So I like building products that I personally like because it's just easier, right? Like some great product people know how to do it for things that they aren't the main user of, but I'm not a great product person. I'm a selfish product person that just loves to build products that I personally love. That's why the NFL is so easy. That's why mobile was so easy. And frankly, that's why Webflow is so easy, because I love what we're doing. I love the mission of the company. Like I wake up every day so excited to start the day. And I've been doing that for now 2 years and 3 months, because what we're doing is truly like transforming people's lives. And I know it's so silly to say that because like sometimes people make too big of a deal of something, but I've seen people who are Webflow developers who have built their own businesses and created so much value for themselves, their families, the next generation, like their employees. And that's really magical when technology creates these opportunities for folks. But it does so in a way without ever sacrificing power. So it's not like you have to dock Webflow and say, well, I can't do this because of these trade-offs. It's one of the few products out there that allows you to build some of the world's most beautiful, powerful sites, and it allows you to do it faster and frankly with fewer resources. So you can do more with less, but you can do it in a way that never has to sacrifice power. And I think that is, it sounds like a silver bullet, which, very few people believe in it, but like, I think that's what's so magical about Webflow and why I love it. And so as a product person at heart, like that gets me excited. And so this is probably one of the most like energizing roles I can possibly be in, because my job is to bring this to more people and help them experience the value of it and hopefully experience all the gains that come with that.
Well, I definitely want to touch on how you view your role as CEO at Webflow. And the question I do want to ask, and I'll prime you, is around, do you consider yourself now still that product centric CEO the kind of business development centric CEO, the finance centric CEO. Like, there's different. CEO
Totally.
is just like a loose term, which often then you need that support system around you to backfill the areas that you're either weaker at or not interested in. But so the jump of your career, I just wanted to touch on quickly in terms of becoming general manager at App Dynamics and then joining Webflow initially as its president and chief operating officer. Seemingly like that was your shift out of product for a
Yeah.
minute and into kind of general management as per the title. But what was the biggest challenge for yourself in moving into those kind of more generalist executive leadership roles as a clearly deeply rooted product person?
Honestly, it's like terrifying. Until you make a mental switch. It's when you move into a generalist role, and like my first shot at GM, it was it was scary because one, I could no longer like own the product, right? Someone else had to own it. And so I didn't know who I was and I didn't know how I brought value because as a product leader, it's like you win strategy and you build a product team and you stay close to the product and the customers. And it's very straightforward in that sense. As a GM, you're sort of like this like, I like to describe it as you're sort of the gas that fills all the spaces, right? And I just couldn't figure out what those were until I realized that when you go from like just the product leader to becoming a GM or a CEO, I still approach it as a product leader. It's just my product is different. My product now is a leadership team. And my job is to build a world-class leadership team that knows how they fit together, how they support each other, and how they ultimately support the vision and the mission of the company. And so I'm still building a product, but the pieces that I'm playing with are the leaders who actually unlock that next generation or that next stair step for the company. And if I look at it through that lens, it's empowering and it gets me really excited because I still, at Webflow, I still see myself as a product centric CEO. And more specifically, I believe the way that our company is going to be successful is continuing to deliver value for our customers. So understanding their pain, understanding how to like find new and innovative ways to address it and how to build product that's delightful and wonderful in doing that. And then how do I build a leadership team that can support that mission of solving those problems and building a company that can scale? Because ultimately what we want to do is not just solve those problems, but we want to solve them for billions of people. And in order to do that, you can't just build a product, right? You need to like bring that product to the masses. You need to support them. You need to reach them. You have to fund it in the right way so you can continue to invest and build and innovate. You need to think about how you make the right balance of those investments, and you have to bring the right team of people together who are motivated and excited about it. And like that takes an intricate set of leadership that is tightly aligned. And so to me, that leadership team is my product.
Well, and it's interesting you frame it that way because um, my/our experience at Craft&Crew with Webflow was we looked at Webflow from afar. The company's been around since what, 2012, like 14 years now, going on 15 years. We were actually founded in 2010. We're roughly the same age as companies, so it's not like we had never heard of Webflow. But I think to your point about Webflow was a product that people who had a need for that product, a designer, a developer, often independent designer or developer, less so an agency, I think was really getting a ton of value from the product. And I think every time we looked at Webflow over the years, it was like, but this isn't a complete business. And for what we do and who we sell to in largely enterprise and B2B customers, they need a solution that is a business tool, not just a really cool product to work with. And that's always what kept us away from Webflow in a more serious way. And then it just, kind of naturally, step by step, it just felt, and I don't know how to say this, I'm not trying to suggest I'm clairvoyant or anything, but it just started to feel like there was a shift. We started hearing from more customers that they would be open to a Webflow type solution or coming explicitly asking for it. Our team started getting more interested in it. And I said, okay, well, let's kick this door open and see what's on the other side. And, when we went to the partner summit in Toronto and heard from yourself and other members of the leadership team, I literally wrote down in all caps, like perfect fit, because it was just like the hesitations that I was having from going full tilt into the platform was that it wasn't that complete business solution that our clients would need. And it just became very obvious that is the the future and that's what's happening here. So that's very exciting. But I then, as I was preparing for this interview, I'm like, oh, how interesting to put in place a leader who clearly is that like hardcore product background executive, but now saying you're being tasked with building a complete solution that is addressing not just the needs of that niche developer or designer who wants a cool product to, very efficiently build sites with. So how do you think about how do you think about that? How do you think about rounding out the leadership team, and how do you think about yourself evolving as a leader to being the person who has to drive that much bigger vision forward when you actually come from the place of, I just selfishly want to build this really cool product that serves this need that I can use?
Totally. I mean, I think a big part of it, like at the core of it is, one, like so much respect and support and like love for our founders. Vlad and Sergey and Brian, like they built this thing, right? They've been building this thing since 2012 and they're still building this thing. And the vision that they set off on Webflow was to bring development superpowers to everyone, right? And they've done a really great job of that so far. And the key piece of that is development superpowers are not limited to just building a beautiful website, right? There's so much to it. And the second part of it is everyone. And if I take those two components of that vision and I think about how do I have impact, it is really about how do we extend the product, right? How do I get more development superpowers built in there? And how do I increase the range of people who can actually feel and feel empowered by Webflow and start to leverage those powers in what they do on a day-to-day basis. And so for me, it's been really exciting because the foundation has been laid. So it's less about me shaping a vision, but rather it's about figuring out how do I take that vision to the next level? How do I execute it? How do I scale it? And the second part of it is like the leadership team that we've built, I've been, overall the leadership team that's here at Webflow is, they are amazing humans who want to have scale, are here because the mission is really exciting and they see the opportunity within it. And on top of that, I think they all understand that we as a company want to win because we've built the best product for all the different needs of our customers. And we want to continue to do that and win by doing that. And so my position as a leader is frankly just to shape that and bring us down that path. And I'm just really lucky that the foundation that's been laid is not pointing us in the right direction. It's just a matter of to carry that torch. And
right.
That is, you couldn't have asked for sort of a better lead off than what I was given by Vlad and the team.
You referred to yourself earlier as your degenerate self. I think it's just your true self, which, if the more degenerate, the better, in my opinion. But you talked about sports betting. You're also a big poker player. And there's a quote, I'm going to quote you for a second here and then I'll get to the question. But you said, in my career, I've had to make hard decisions that were unpopular at the time, but helped a business in the long run. Oftentimes I put my entire career on the line with some of these decisions, and it's poker that taught me to have conviction in those decisions because at least the outcome could be somewhat in your control, and it's not always the best hand that wins, is what you said. What is an example of one of those decisions where you felt, whether rightly or wrongly at the time, like your entire, quote unquote, it's a big statement, so your entire career could have been on the line if things hadn't gone properly?
Oh yeah. I mean, this, when I had first thought of this, it was actually, at the NFL, you have a very short, you have a really short off season, right? Cause like after, the Super Bowl draft or combine and then draft, there's like free agency and then a small window before the season kicks off again. And typically that's the window where like our team could really like think about big, meaningful changes to our products, because once the season starts, you don't really want to be like submitting updates and changing things around because people built their weekly habits. And we did a complete redesign of our mobile app in that like 3-month off, not even, it's like 2.5-month off season. And that was a huge risk because like we're taking something that had been downloaded by, hundreds of millions of people and was going to be the main interface for people for that whole next season of football. And a lot of people were really nervous that in doing so, that would be a big risk in itself. The second part of that risk was we ripped out about 75% of the functionality of the core app that existed at the time, because we're like, look, we make it simpler and we just focus on the most important parts of the product. We believed at our core that that was going to make, one, a better experience for our fans, but two, it was actually going to drive deeper engagement, because there weren't sort of like so many decisions that they're going to constantly have to make between, picking what section to go to or what things to look at. We could really focus them on the right content or the right experience. And a lot of people question that because, in general, tech, everyone's always like, oh, what other features are you adding? What more are you putting in? And very rarely as a product person is someone saying, so what 10 features are you taking out of the product to make it a cleaner user experience, right? Like people would be like, don't, someone uses that. Some obscure person uses that. And that was a huge risk. And, I was very new at the time. I just joined. And so there was definitely a lot of risk on the table and doing a complete redesign and essentially hacking away 75% of the functionality and saying, I also never plan to bring that back. So I plan to take away a lot of things that, people are using in hopes that I can focus people on the most important things. But it ended up working out fantastically. The app engagement went up, people were really happy, really good ratings. But it gave me a lot of courage, because what I have found is when you do make big bets, like, yes, you can always get it wrong, but typically when you're faced with those hard decisions, it usually means either you're going to have a massive impact, what good or bad, versus I just don't believe in doing a bunch of tiny incremental things and building them up over time. It feels too slow and not bold, at least not for a growth business or sort of like a company that's really trying to accelerate. I think incrementality just feels too slow and too basic at that point.
So what is the big bet at Webflow? What's the feature or feature set that you as CEO are looking at and guiding your team towards hacking away at, because you believe that bet's going to pay off?
I mean, our big bet is where people have seen us typically as a website builder. And just, they look at us as like a CMS and a front end and then hosting. We want to become a website experience platform. We are shifting into a full platform suite that is going to have a myriad of products. So before, someone would design and build their website and even host it in Webflow, but they would go do all the sort of ongoing management and optimization and iteration somewhere else. We want that entire web lifecycle to sit with Webflow. And that is a big bet, because this is a bunch of net new products we're building that are going to be seamlessly integrated into our product. And hopefully it works, but I really believe that it's the right thing to do. And I think it's what our customers need.
Well, Linda, like yourself, I'm also a fan of big bets, whether for the better or the worse, I guess, is what you're signing up for. And I just want to say, not that I think that I'm a huge player today, but I've taken a bet on you and on Webflow. We've publicly stated, it's right on the homepage of the Craft&Crew website, that our mission is now to become the #1 Webflow agency partner in the world, and we want to do that within a year. So, that's a pretty steep hill to climb, and there's a lot of amazing partners that already exist. So, but I think for us, it was more just a signal of like, if you don't have direction, you'll never get anywhere. and we believed in you and the leadership and what the product is and what it can become in terms of being the backbone of what we had to do to support our clients. So we're very excited and bullish on that future. I also like to bet. I like to play poker, and I think though that under your leadership, it's a pretty safe bet. So, and I'm not just saying that. This is you're already on the podcast. I don't have to blow any more smoke, but I really do appreciate everything you're doing. Linda, if you could go back to that 18 to that, if you could go back to that 8-year-old girl who wants to sniff and or pump gas for a living, at your maybe that was the start of your degenerate self, but if you could go back to that little girl and say, hey, here's where we've gone, what do you think they have to say about the path that you've taken?
I think that 8-year-old self would just be really grateful. I think I've been so lucky my whole life. The more I meet people and hear about their childhoods and experiences, the one thing I got to experience that frankly a lot of people haven't is there's never been a point throughout my childhood and even adult life where I have questioned whether or not I can do what makes me happy and like that I can pursue my dreams. And that's something that I think not everybody gets. And I think a lot of it is because my parents were incredibly supportive and they kept telling me and reinforcing the fact that I could do whatever would make me happy and I could pursue my dreams. And the fact that I never had a second guess that, it frankly allowed me to blindly, continuously pursue many dreams until I found the one that made me the happiest. And that's a freedom that I know that not everybody has. I'm just really lucky to have it. And I think that 8-year-old self would just be really happy that I found something that makes me like wake up every day, like punching the air because I'm just so pumped. Like I'm just so pumped to start working.
There is a joke in there about being pumped and pumping gas, but we'll save the terrible joke for hopefully what can become a round 2 of this in a couple of years. See where you and the company have evolved, where you as a leader have evolved. It would be amazing to check in and see where the journey has led. But for now, Linda Tong, CEO of Webflow, a great partner of ours. Thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for everything you're doing for the Webflow community. It was a true honor to interview you today, and I just can't thank you enough.
Oh my gosh, the honor is all mine. I am like so grateful to be able to chat with you, and I'm so lucky to be a part of the Webflow community. So thank you. Thank you for playing ball, and thank you for being so supportive.
Journey Map is hosted by me, Dave Hale, and produced by Craft&Crew. At Craft&Crew, we are on a mission to become the #1 Webflow agency for mid-market and enterprise brands in the world. To learn more, visit us at www.craftandcrew.ca. Thanks for taking this journey with us today.